Hey, welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Think Thursday is all about your beautiful, brilliant human brain. We're talking neuroscience. We're talking behavior change. We are talking about your mindset. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Hey there, it's Molly, and welcome back to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist. Think Thursdays are all about our beautiful, brilliant human brains. We talk about neuroscience and mindset, practical things that help us understand ourselves a little bit better and hopefully make life feel just a little easier along the way. A couple of weeks ago, during this Mental Health Awareness Month, I spent some time talking about sleep and mental health, and specifically, I talked about a technique called cognitive shuffling. If you listen to that episode, I'll link it in the show notes. You might remember that cognitive shuffling is a way of intentionally moving your thoughts in random and neutral directions so that your brain has a chance to let go of the looping and problem solving that often keep us awake at night. And after recording that episode, I found myself thinking about something interesting. Because if intentionally redirecting our thoughts can sometimes help our brains settle down, then what happens when we're redirecting our attention all day long without realizing it? Not intentionally, not strategically, but automatically. Because I think many of us, I know I can speak for myself, live in a state of constant shifting and barely notice that we're doing it anymore. You sit down to answer an email, and while you're typing, your phone lights up. You glance at the text message because it will only take a second. And while you're there, you notice another notification, and then suddenly remember you needed to order dog food and return a call or add something to your calendar. You look up one thing online and then another thing catches your eye, and before you know it, 20 or 30 minutes have gone by and somehow you've traveled through 5 different topics and 7 browser tabs. You look up and you think, why do I feel mentally tired already? Or maybe even more confusing, why do I feel tired when I don't feel like I've actually gotten anything done? I think most of us call that multitasking. And for years, we wore multitasking like a badge of honor. I know I did. Being busy and doing multiple things at once became evidence that we were efficient or productive or capable. I can juggle a lot. I work well under pressure. I am a great multitasker. I know how many of you moms really hold on to, I'm a great multitasker. But neuroscience actually tells a different story because what we think of as multitasking isn't multitasking at all. Our brains are mostly switching. They're moving rapidly from one thing to another and then back again. Now, I think that's an important distinction because it sounds harmless at first. Switching attention doesn't seem like a big deal. We do it all day long. But every switch carries a cost. One of the most fascinating concepts I came across while researching this episode comes from a researcher named Sophie Leroy, who studied something called attention residue. I love this concept because once you hear it, you start noticing it everywhere. Attention residue suggests that when we move from one task to another, our minds don't make a perfectly clean transition. A portion of our attention stays behind, almost like leaving footprints in wet cement. So physically, you may be working on task B, but mentally, some part of your brain is still hanging around in task A. Maybe you're trying to write a report, but part of your mind is replaying a conversation from earlier in the day. Maybe you're sitting at dinner, but still thinking about that email that you never finished and that you need to send tomorrow morning. Maybe you're reading a book while mentally keeping a running checklist in the background. Part of you moved on and part of you didn't. And those little leftovers begin to accumulate. I almost picture it like trying to leave a room while a piece of your shirt keeps getting caught on the doorknob. You keep moving forward, but there is this tiny pull backward every single time. Eventually, that pulling starts to feel exhausting. Then there is our prefrontal cortex, which, of course, I've talked about many times before. This is essentially your brain's executive center, and it helps with planning, attention, decision making, and your working memory. And working memory, which is not a part that we talk about a lot for the executive function or the prefrontal cortex, but it's there. Working memory is important because it's basically your brain's temporary holding space. Think of it like mental sticky notes. The thing is, there are only so many sticky notes available. We sometimes act as if our brain has unlimited processing power, but that's just not true. Our brains are much like having a small desk with only so much space to spread things out on before things start falling onto the floor. And interestingly enough, researchers have found that mental fatigue isn't always about doing too much. Sometimes it's about doing too many different things. You can spend 2 uninterrupted hours deeply focused on one meaningful project and feel energized afterward. And then spend another day bouncing around between emails and texts and messages and meetings and online searches and little administrative tasks and somehow feel completely drained by dinner. Same amount of time, completely different experience. And then there's dopamine, because of course dopamine shows up. Our brains are wired to pay attention to novelty. Thousands of years ago, that was useful because if something changed in our environments, there was a decent chance that it mattered for our safety. Movements in the bushes mattered. Unexpected sounds mattered. New things deserved our attention. And the problem is that modern life is essentially an endless novelty machine. There is always another notification, another headline, another text message, another update, another thing asking for just a tiny piece of your attention. And every one of those things whispers the same message. This is important. Look over here just for a second. I notice this in myself all the time. I can sit down with every intention of working on a podcast episode, and somehow I end up checking an email, researching something, opening another tab because I remembered something else I wanted to look at. And during all of it, I have this strange feeling that I am being incredibly productive because I am doing so many things. 45 minutes later, I realize I've mostly just been moving my attention around. I don't think the takeaway here is that technology is bad. I just want to say that straight out. Or that we should just, throw our phones into a lake. I think the more important takeaway is understanding that if your brain feels tired sometimes, if you feel mentally scattered, if you struggle to stay focused, it may not be because something is wrong with you. Your brain may be simply responding exactly the way it was designed to respond. The challenge is that the world changed much faster than our brains did. So here's your Think Thursday experiment for this week. Choose one thing, just one thing, and give it 20 uninterrupted minutes. Protect that space. Close the extra tabs. Put the phone down. Resist the urge to check one thing. And then simply notice what happens. Because maybe the goal isn't becoming better at juggling more things more often. Maybe it's becoming more intentional about where our attention goes. Because attention really is the most valuable, one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable resource that we have. And in a world that is constantly competing for it, learning to protect it may be one of the healthiest things that we can do for our brains. Thanks for listening. That's all I have for you this week, my friends. Have a great rest of your weekend, a great Memorial Day weekend, and I will see you on Monday.